We begin with the news from the United States, where US President Donald Trump has announced a raft of tariffs on goods imported into the US from around the world. Trump declared a 10% baseline tax on all imports from all countries and higher tariff rates on dozens of nations that run trade surpluses with the United States. All foreign-made cars will be hit with a 25% trade tax. Trump said his administration would charge half of what he claimed other countries were charging the US.
Starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations. It's been a long time since we even thought of that. We used to think about it a lot. We didn't think about it for many decades, and you see what's happened. For nations that treat us badly, we will calculate the combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary barriers, and other forms of cheating. And because we are being very kind, we're kind people, very kind, we will charge them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us. So the tariffs will be not a full reciprocal. I could have done that, yes, but it would have been tough for a lot of countries who didn't want to do that.
OK, so let's take a detailed look at some of the tariffs that Donald Trump was talking about there. The US will impose an across-the-board 25% tariff on all foreign-made cars, a 20% tax on imports from the European Union, 34% on goods from China, 26% on India, and 24% on Japan. Right, for more on this, we can speak to Jens Korte, a business correspondent based in New York. Jens, having had a little more time to dig into the detail, what stands out to you about these new tariffs?
Anthony, that is pretty much the big one. And we just saw it, 34% tariffs towards China, if I understand correctly. That comes on top of the already in place 20%, so that would make it about 54%. If you look at Vietnam, just another example, 46%. If you look at, for example, sporting goods, sneakers from Nike, for example, or also from On Holding, so On Running, the Swiss company, all of those shoes are made, or a lot of them, in Vietnam. So those will be much more expensive here in the United States. There are some exceptions for now when it comes to reciprocal tariffs towards Mexico, for example, or Canada. But overall, that is a pretty big announcement that we've gotten out of the Rose Garden here on Wednesday.
So what does Donald Trump think, Jens, will be achieved with these new tariffs?
Well, I think he even kind of mentioned it, that we are going back when it comes to trade policies to the 1800s. I mean, those tariffs are the most aggressive, at least since World War II. The Trump administration probably tries to achieve two targets. I mean, one is making the United States a big industrial nation again, and then also those tariffs are meant to partly finance the big tax cuts that are supposed to come later this year. But also, if you listen to the wording of the US president, there also seems to be some political aspects included in those tariffs.
Markets have been volatile for weeks in anticipation of this day. Do we have any idea of how markets will react on Thursday?
Anthony, we definitely have. I mean, and after our tradings, we saw the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropping around 1,000 points. We had the Nasdaq Composite, so technology shares, trading down by more than 2%. I mean, if you look at a lot of imports into the United States, semiconductors, for instance, could be hit, but also computer, smartphones. So you have stocks of chip makers like NVIDIA trading to the downside, Apple trading lower. Some of the retailers who also import some of their goods into the United States also seem to get hit pretty hard. And then the only upside seems to be that gold is toying with another record. But that will be a pretty interesting trading day on Thursday, to say the least.
Business correspondent Jens Korte in New York. Thanks so much. Right, for more, Abigail Hall is an associate professor in economics at the University of Tampa in Florida. Good to see you again, Abigail. Here we are. What is your reaction to Donald Trump and what he calls US Liberation Day?
I'm not sure what exactly the president is attempting to liberate us from. If he's trying to liberate us from sound economic policies, he's certainly probably succeeding in that endeavor. But my response to these is very much what it has been from the beginning, which is that these policies are fundamentally at odds with economic prosperity for both the United States and the US's trading partners.
Help us understand a little of Trump's reciprocal tariffs, if you would. The president says we do to them what they do to us. What's wrong with that?
So this idea that we are supposedly leveling the economic playing field fundamentally misunderstands what the economy is. The economy is not a game. People and countries are not pieces on a chessboard that you can move around. My mother used to tell me growing up that if all of my friends were jumping off of a bridge, that doesn't make it a good idea. And tariffs are the economic equivalent. Just because other countries are imposing them and harming their own consumers doesn't mean that the U.S. should do the same.
So as to his argument that he is simply just levelling the playing field, is that the case?
No, I don't think that this is the case at all. This is clearly an attempt to utilize trade policy as a means of leverage. As your last guest mentioned, I think, at least based on what the president has said today and previously, he's attempting to utilize tariffs to replace the U.S. income tax. But unlike in the 1800s or even earlier in the 20th century, we live in a very different world now that is fundamentally changed and interconnected. And so these policies that the president is assuming are going to be a large economic windfall, I don't think people should hold their breath.
So part of that new world is that China is essentially the factory. The 34% new trade tariff on all imports from China, what will this change in China and what will that effect be in the US?
So in the Chinese case, tariffs are going to make their goods more expensive to be purchased in the U.S. So we can expect fewer imports to the United States from China as a result. It would not surprise me at all if the Chinese government implemented its own set of tariffs or additional tariffs against the United States. Now, if we're just talking about the tariffs that the U.S. is imposing on Chinese goods, taking potential responses from China out of the equation, we can anticipate that a lot of the goods that U.S. consumers purchase are going to be more expensive. So everything from electronic items to things like toys and video games.
You recently called Trump's tariffs moves a game of economic dodgeball that is harming businesses, consumers and investors. If there are so many losers in this game, who's the winner?
It's an excellent question. So whenever we talk about trade policy, one of the things that I highlight for my students is that the reason that these types of policies are so difficult to remove once they've been put in place is that there is this principle of what we call concentrated benefits and dispersed cost. So the costs are often not realized, although these tariffs are sufficiently large. I think your average consumer is going to notice them and notice them in a big way. But the real winners are the special interest groups who find that they are protected from foreign competition. At the press conference today, you saw lots of members of United Auto Workers as well as the Teamsters. These are the groups, and they're certainly not the only ones, who are slated to benefit from these at the expense of everyone else.
Is there any substance, in your view, to Trump's claim that his tariffs might slow down the economy for a transitional period before everything starts getting better further on down the path?
I don't see that as being anywhere close to what we could anticipate in reality. I think that those assumptions are heroic at a minimum. In terms of trade policy and tariffs specifically, it is remarkably difficult to find a policy topic on which so many economists, regardless of their political or ideological leanings, are in agreement. And in this case, the economist and what economics teaches us is very clear. These are bad policies. They have short-term consequences, but also they have profound long-term consequences. And so the consequences of these policies are not going anywhere. And we likely haven't even thought about some of the other outcomes of these policies.
Yeah, to those outcomes, what do you expect from the rest of the world? How are they going to react to this?
It will be interesting to see. One of the options is that the gloves come off. And so other countries say, you know what? Okay, United States, you have decided that you are going to go your own way, that you are going to pull back into this more isolationist position. And so we all raise our tariffs. Something else that I think is a potentially perfectly viable option is that other countries throughout the world decide to join together and push back against the US. I also wouldn't be surprised if you saw a lot of countries outside of the United States really rethink their trading partnerships, so start looking elsewhere, including places like China and Russia, which certainly would not be the intention of these policies.
Is Trump setting in motion, Abigail, a fundamental upheaval of the global economy, or can the next administration easily unpick or roll back these changes that he's setting in place?
It's certainly difficult for me to predict precisely how these things are going to play out in the future in terms of what would happen with a subsequent administration. Importantly, tariffs are not chiseled in stone, and we have seen historically how a reduction in trade barriers, particularly tariffs, has increased the material well-being of millions of people across the globe, including in the United States. So it is certainly possible for these policies to be removed. That being said, I think that there's some real questions about what damage has already been done with the United States and its trading partners. The current administration has really called into question the US's position as a faithful and reliable trading partner, and I'm not sure how easily or quickly that kind of reputational damage can be corrected.
A lot to take in. Always great to have you on, Abigail. Economics Professor Abigail Hall, thank you so much.
My pleasure.